So for the past like 2 months, I've been obsessed with looping, live looping with pedals, delay pedals. And it started off with me taking a Guitar Center gift card for Christmas and buying a TC Electronics Ditto X4, which I loved for the time I had it. But it did have like several issues that started growing on me. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to dissuade you from buying a Ditto X4. If you're into looping and you're just starting out, which technically I still am. But it's a good machine. It's got 2 tracks on it. You can layer on top of each track. You can undo the last layer you put on. It works fairly reliably. I don't know if I would trust going on a stage with one. So I'll just get right into why I switched from the Ditto X4 to the RC300. Number one is the commands didn't seem to be reliable to me. And now I'm not saying that the shit on the pedal. Maybe it's just not in phase with how I do things, but I found it very hard to stop a track, and I would have to sit there and fidget with it until I was just hitting the button really hard. And I don't know what it is, but if you hit a button hard enough on that thing, it'll hit the button next to it. So like if I want to stop track 2, I'm sitting there trying to double click track 2 and I hit the fucking stop button and the whole thing stops. Like if you're in a public exhibition performing, that would be embarrassing as shit. So depending on where you want to take it, I mean, if you just want to sit in a room and take acid and trip out, man, you should have no qualms with the $250-ish TC Electronics Ditto X4. Another thing to consider if you're going to get one is if you're going to be using it standing up or sitting down, if you're going to be using it with your hands or your feet. The Ditto X4 is great if you want to use your hands with it because it's a lot easier to work those buttons. They're technically not pedals. They're buttons that you hit with your foot or your hand, I guess. And one of the problems I've had with these buttons is that they're very fucking loud. If you got a live mic in the room, it's going to pick up audible clicking. Once again, not very good if you're going to do any like serious applications. I did notice that TC Electronics does make a mic looper, which I guess has a quieter button, but it's only 1 track. So another thing about these buttons is if you want to play guitar and loop guitar, if you put this thing on the floor, if you're wearing shoes, it's kind of awkward. I guess, like, I'm not good with pedals barefoot. I don't typically hit them like that. But I guess it has been recommended that you use it barefoot, so I tried that too, and it's still awkward because the pedals, or the buttons, or whatever the fuck you want to call them, are up on this ledge that's not even with the ground. It's another thing that makes them very hard to hit. Once again, the fucking stop function is a double tap, which is not easy, especially if you're trying not to hit the buttons next to it. Like, seriously, because of the physicality of this thing, it's not very ergonomic. It's basically just a box with crap sticking out of it. I end up feeling like I look silly trying to operate the thing sometimes. But once again, if you got the thing up on a table and you're just working it with your hands, it's much easier. But the microphone picks it up, which sucks. So I would say if you're doing mostly guitar related stuff, because on a side note, it doesn't pick up if you plug a microphone into the input without plugging it like a powered guitar with pickups and everything, it sucks at picking up just a microphone. You're going to have to run a mixer after your microphone before you get into the TC Ditto X4. But yeah, if you're just doing mostly guitar stuff with it and it doesn't have to be too complicated, there's not quick changes in it. Like I said, if you just want to space out and jam to your own riffs, the machine is pretty good. There's no time it gave me an error message or told me like, yeah, I can't do that or anything. If you hit the commands right, it will do what it's supposed to do. And it's not poor quality wise. I feel like I could smash somebody's windshield with that thing and it would probably work fine afterwards. It's pretty much solid steel. So if you want to get one, maybe not, depending on what you're trying to do. I like to delude myself into thinking maybe I'll hopefully do something serious that involves being on a stage in front of people, and I want to minimize the opportunity for embarrassing, awkward equipment failure bullshit. I'm just paranoid like that. You may be excellent at working this thing. I suggest just going in the store and trying and seeing how you feel about it. But those were mostly my qualms, which led me to trade it in and put the money towards a Boss RC300, which so far I'm very fucking impressed with. The main reservation I had about this machine was that from all the tutorials and all the walkthroughs that I looked at, it looked like this thing was trying to bind you to its own metronome, which I don't like. I can keep pretty decent free time for like 2 bars. So I figured if it was forcing me to play along or beatbox along to a click, that was going to be binding, and I was going to have to like be able to monitor the click, and then I don't want the audience to hear the click, and I would have to stay in this fucking rigid frame that this computer's chugging along on. But I'm here to tell you that does not have to be the case. This whole rhythm section, you can turn this shit off. And if you perform a phrase of music into it, it'll generally be able to detect whether, just by the length of the phrase, it'll detect whether it's 1 bar or 2 bars, and it'll suss out to tempo to what you put in there, just judging by how far the distance is from the beginning to the end and how many notes the computer thinks it's going to be on. Sometimes it hits halftime or double time depending on how slow or fast you're going. But if you beatbox into the microphone and your timing is relatively good, this blinker will fucking line up with what you did. It'll automatically sync itself to you, not the other way around. So that is really cool. It was a real relief, and it's really what sold me on getting this machine. And the Ditto X4 with the double tap to stop each track. This machine has a dedicated stop button for each of the not 2 tracks, but 3 tracks. One thing I will say, it does have the undo and redo function that you get by holding down the play button for a second. But the Boss, I have a lot more trouble timing it on the Boss because it seems to take a little bit longer than the Ditto X4 did to actually undo and redo the last layer that you put on. So I'm trying to learn the timing of that because it seems to be consistent no matter what the tempo of the song is. I think it's about 2 seconds if you hold the play button down. It'll erase the last thing you did. But another thing, the pedals are shaped like pedals and they're low to the ground. You barely have to lift the toe of your foot to be able to tap down on one of these things. And when you do, you don't hear shit. Plus, this thing's got a bunch of onboard effects. Not that I really care about that because all my effects processors are outside of this thing because I need to be able to adjust them or whatever. Like, you can adjust the effects on this thing and send which channel they affect or if they affect the output of the entire pedal and all that stuff. But it involves bending over in the middle of what you're doing, and I got a guitar on, so that's not very easy. But just in general on this Boss, stuff seems to come out like groovier and it's easier to keep time. I'm not really into serial mode. I mostly do sync mode. Serial mode is when on track 1 you can play something and then afterwards the shit on track 2 plays and you can alternate them. Sync mode is when I can just use all 3 tracks to just add and subtract layers and play and start and stop them. And I've only had the thing for like 5 hours, but it's performed pretty reliably, except this one time I was hitting a lot of shit. I was changing back and forth between drum beats and stuff like that, erasing whole tracks and replacing them in the middle, and the screen said too busy, and it wouldn't do nothing until I turned it off and turned it back on again. But I was like really giving it a lot of commands, so you can choke it up, but it seems to take a whole lot to do it. I'll be keeping my eye out, I guess, for the quality wise, performance, words and stuff. But yeah, that's my analysis. The TC Electronics is pretty good, but the Boss RC300 is way better, obviously. You probably could have not listened to me say all this shit and figured it out yourself, but you just watched it.